Teras utama dalam Perbelanjawan 2023 adalah tentang kos sara hidup, cost of living. Dalam kita mengenali tentang apa implikasinya terhadap kos sara hidup dan bagaimana ia akan diterjemahkan dalam Belanjawan 2023, ia akan lebih baik kalau kita dapat kenal pasti tentang apa situasi yang sedang berlaku sekarang berkenaan dengan inflasi negara. Okey, kita mulakan dengan headline inflation dan juga historical evidence of inflation kita ya. Dekat belakang saya ini adalah indeks harga pengguna pada setiap bulan Januari hingga ke mungkin 12 tahun yang lalu ya. Sebab 12 tahun lalu we need to know the historical background of things. Itu penting. Daripada beberapa tahun yang lampau, inflasi kita adalah di antara julat 4.0 dengan 2.0 dengan 4.0. Namun demikian, inflasi telah pun turun pada waktu COVID. Because of that, there is a significant recovery of inflation. Ekonomi kita pun mengembang susulan daripada pembukaan ekonomi kita dan inflasi telah naik secara mendadak. Kalau kita tengok, walaupun dia 3.7 headline inflation of today, bulan Januari 2023, this gap ni is actually quite huge, which is 6 points, 7 points gap. This is something that the government has been trying to address, particularly when it comes to kos sara hidup yang diterjemahkan kepada golongan B40 dan juga M40. How is it going to be impacting them? For now, it's very, very bad. Ya, that's why bajet ini akan mengetengahkan ataupun dijangkakan akan mengetengahkan beberapa goodies untuk menolong kos sara hidup bagi B40. How I know this? The data says so. Okay, that's the first chart. Another chart yang kita kena tengok adalah tentang isu bagaimana keadaan inflasi when it comes to how the government has been handling it. Ya, inflasi keseluruhan ataupun core headline inflation, inflasi teras, core inflation dan juga inflasi tanpa bahan api. The same story goes for all three sets, di mana kesemua is around 4%. 4% is actually quite high ya. Bila kita tengok tadi, that graph just now was averaging about 2%. Apa yang kerajaan telah buat? Kerajaan telah pun increase OPR Mei, Julai, Oktober, December ya. Ini semua OPR interest rate hike untuk cuba arrest the rise of inflation. And of course OPR yang baru-baru ni pada bulan 12 bulan 1 tidak naik. Mungkin kerajaan telah pun mengenal pasti bahawa inflation rate dah taper off ya, from high 4 point something to now 3.9. Maknanya the government or bank negara for that matter has understood that perhaps inflation has been arrested for the time being. Namun, berdasarkan beberapa perbincangan saya dengan beberapa analisis, mereka tidak menolak kemungkinan untuk melihat satu lagi kadar inflasi OPR ditingkatkan mungkin sebanyak 25 mata asas pada bulan 4 nanti. Okay, that's the second story. Third story that I want to share with you is this. Kita kena benda ni. Okay. Third story. Ya Allah ya Rabbi. It's 2023, we still having trouble with this. Okay. Inflasi bagi kumpulan B40 is also key to analyze. Sebabnya, bila kita tengok is 3.7, 3.5, kalau kita tengok inflasi keseluruhan, inflasi pendapatan bawah B30, it's actually quite similar across the income sector. That's why ada satu theory yang menyatakan bahawa klasifikasi B40, M40 dengan T20 mungkin tidak boleh diguna pakai. Adakah Menteri Kewangan akan memberikan satu gambaran yang lebih jelas tentang bagaimana kita ingin mengklasifikasikan kadar pendapatan rakyat Malaysia di luar kebiasaan kita untuk mengklasifikasinya sebagai B40, M40, T40. I don't know yet. We might see, we might not see. But this graph actually shows that the M40 and T20 is also suffering the same way as the B40. Alright. Now we look at apa kategori dia. Benda apa yang dah meningkat in terms of cost ya. One thing that we need to look at is makanan. Everybody knows this, makanan. Dia dah naik 6.7, 6.8%. 6.7 pada bulan Januari tahun ni, 6.8 pada bulan tahun lepas, bulan 12 tahun lepas. Pengangkutan also big problem, yeah. So these two are big issues that we need to look at. One more item that is increasing without fail is of course restaurants and hotel. Now we don't know how this is going to look like because pembukaan China dan kita akan memperlihatkan pelbagai ribuan pelancong daripada China mungkin akan menyebabkan isu ini lebih keruh. So that's another area, but at the same time hospitality, travel, tourism also gives benefits to our industry players. So that is positive. The only negative inflation rate that we see is actually communication, internet, and of course telco. Those are the areas yang I guess negative inflation, there's only one. Lain semua naik, ya. Pendidikan naik, tembakau semua naik, tembakau, right? So how is the government going to address all these inflation rates? Okay. Yang terakhir adalah tentang di mana harga meningkat secara mendadak. Kalau hang duduk Putrajaya, kantoi. 5.9% inflation, 7.9% pada bulan lepas. And of course, our lawmakers, they belong in Putrajaya, but they don't necessarily stay there. So, adakah mereka mendengar keluhan warga Putrajaya kerana mereka sedang mengalami peningkatan harga yang sangat mendadak? But the rest is the same. Kita tengok, everything is about 3.3 to 4.0. Semua ni, it's about the same. Sarawak, Selangor, Johor, Pahang, Perak, KL, Sabah. Basically, Malaysia, right? There are some states yang harga tak naik secara tinggi sangat, macam Penang, Labuan, Kedah dan sebagainya. But most of Malaysians reside in these states. Yeah, we're looking at more than 70, maybe even 80% of Malaysians reside in one of these states. So harga peningkatan indeks harga pengguna telah pun melibatkan B40, M40, T20. About 80% of us are suffering. All of us need to eat. Harga dah naik. All of us perhaps want to go for a holiday or two dekat restoran dan hotel. Harga dah naik. And all of us travel. I came here to present this to you pun, I naik kereta, I have to pay toll, I have to pay petrol. So these are all costs that needs to be figured out. The government has been making a lot of postulations in terms of what they intend to do for this budget. We are waiting for their budget presentation tomorrow at 3 p.m. One thing is for sure, budget deficit is going to be key right now. Maybank Investment Banking Group, for instance, yesterday made an analysis and announced that the budget deficit for this retabling of budget 2023 is going to be lower at 5.0% compared to 5.5% budget last year. So because of this, we're also looking at the revenue sources of the government. The finance minister as well as the Prime Minister, Datuk Seri Ibrahim, has said that the issuances of new taxes, especially the much touted and much debated GST tax, is not going to be done, at least in the near term. So how then will the government move forward on this? Here to unpack this and more is my guest, Wan Zulkifli, CEO of Ethis Malaysia. Dazrik, let's talk a little bit more about the sources of revenue for the government. While I would like to talk about the goodies that the budget is going to give, one has to give a lot of focus on revenue. After all, it is the other side of the equation of the budget, and therefore it does bring about that whole conversation of where is the government going to get money? Yeah. Where do you think the government is going to get money?
Yeah, I think to answer your question short, I think most fundamentally will be around the taxes, and you've mentioned it earlier. I think a lot of speculation even last year around GST and that it's not going to be implemented in the near future. So what that means is that potentially it will come to a point of the distribution, or rather the source of taxes, and I think some have already speculated right, between the T20s, M40s and B40s. Yeah. Most speculate that the taxes or individual taxes for M40s would not rise, and simply because of what you mentioned, the inflation, price of inflation and cost of living. Balancing those out is very tricky. But the T20s, most also speculated that maybe the marginal rise of the tax will come from the T20 group. So it's more, to me, I feel that it is more of a wealth distribution, and it's consistent with what Prime Minister Anwar have mentioned around Malaysia Madani, where he propagate what I consider as a whole society approach. So it's not just for a specific group of people to benefit of certain goodies, incentives and stuff like that, but he tried to propagate the distribution of benefits, goods, and wealth across segments of Malaysia, I guess.
Another area of concern is trying to improve on the corporate tax. However, we're looking at this cycle being a bit tough. Corporate Malaysia did suffer during the financial year 2020 and 2021. However, many Malaysian corporates, especially large corporates, have recovered since then. 2023 is going to bring about mixed bag of results. However, if we do talk about taxes for budget 2023, it's going to be impacting the earnings for this year, for corporates making money this year. And of course, we're also looking at the 97% of businesses in this country, which is the SMEs. And if we look at higher corporate tax or business tax, we're looking at lower margins for these businesses. How do you think Malaysia is going to remain competitive, considering that this is going to be the situation where we're going to be seeing a lot more taxes coming in from corporates?
In honesty, I think we will be in the situation of we need to do, I guess, periodic revise in terms of our forecasts, our projections, GDP growth and stuff like that. You've mentioned it. I think there was a downward forecast of 5% now with regards to GDP. I think first and foremost, what would be a key consideration beyond the corporates or MSMEs is actually the livelihood of general Malaysian populations. And I guess that's what the balance that needs to happen between incentives, goodies, and also taxes, right? You're right, there'll probably be certain implications with regards to business growth. And you've mentioned about 97% of the MSMEs, 97% of the composition of economy,
businesses.
It's actually the MSMEs. But I don't think the focus of the Malaysian government now is actually primarily on growth per se, but it's almost the resiliencies that potentially previous government have done, but just to sort of make sure it's robust enough. For the next 3 to 5 years, Malaysian, generally, businesses and the people, first and foremost, can sustain the livelihood. Secondly, make sure the businesses are kind of okay at this point of time, build that rigor, robustness, to steadfast over the next 3 years. Who knows, maybe the next 2-3 years might be a bit more challenging than this year. And we could forecast based on what happens in the West. Might not happen recession, but we have seen, and the signals are clear. I think we've gone into much tighter fiscal deficit, which means it's very, very tricky for the government to balance out, subsidies, and also not to make sure expenditure would actually enable more price hike.
I mean, we all know that if the removal of subsidy were to happen, or the slow reduction or gradual reduction of subsidies, price inflation is going to go up, especially on food. We're looking at anywhere between 5 to 9% based on PwC's estimates, as well as Maybank Investment Banking Group estimates, the ones that I've been speaking about with them for the past week or so. Also, let's look at the subsidy bill. In case for those who are unaware, we're looking at Tengku Zafrul, when he was the finance minister, said that subsidy bill came to about 80 billion. This was in September. One would argue that it could go up to 100 billion. When I had Mr. Ponya from PwC, he argues that the subsidy capture was about 60 billion, but 40 plus billion is from fuel. Whatever it is, if we remove subsidies, we're going to see a price increase. Considering that this is the case, some of the economists are arguing that we need to give direct cash aid or some form of it. We need to move away from the stigma of the notion of giving direct cash aid. However, if you look at the old ways of doing things, like BRIM, for instance, under the previous prime ministers, 3 prime ministers ago, that was something that was actually being debated and discussed today. Economists are discussing that perhaps this is the more efficient way of ensuring that this is how we manage cost of living. Then there is also the whole notion of EPF. Are we okay to allow for Malaysians to withdraw more from EPF? There's a lot of argument that says no, this is not good. Already EPF is saying certain percentage. I can't remember the numbers off the cuff, but a large percentage of Malaysians have less than 10,000 ringgit in the EPF. Where do you stand when it comes to cost of living, direct cash aid, EPF withdrawals?
I think it's a tricky one. So if I'm in the government shoes, I would probably look more into the now, as opposed to for the 3 to 5 years. And simply because the resiliencies and robustness that I've mentioned earlier, and this is not just for the entities of Malaysia, corporate Malaysia and stuff like that, but more so for the livelihoods of the people. And you've mentioned specifically on, I guess, savings and investments, right? There's always going to be two sides of the coins. I think what would make sense now is actually not so much so about the goodies, the subsidies. I think it works to a certain extent, but I think what could be done better with regards to the target segment that it needs to cater for. We've seen in previous budgets, previous initiatives and stuff like that, it's kind of missed target. The subsidies usually goes to upper tier M40s or T20s. And the ones who really needs the most is actually the B40s or lower tiers M40s. And this is for various reasons, whether it's accessibility, infrastructure and stuff like that. So I think with this, and hopefully it writes on the notion of Malaysia Madani, for example, it can be better targeted to the ones who really needs the most. And you're right, when you spoke about EPF, right? I think a lot of those who takes out the savings and stuff like that is actually from the B40s and M40s. And these are the ones who has lower, I guess, security in terms of long-term savings, pensions and stuff like that. Not necessarily the T20s and the M40s. So these are...
However, I would argue that there would be certain percentages within the M40s might not have that kind of social net. But I get what you're trying to say.
Yeah. So theoretically, the subsidies need still to be done to a certain extent. But it has to be better targeted, and I think this is a structural problem. I don't think it will be solved this year.
No, of course. No, nobody would argue otherwise. Nobody would say, no, we don't think targeted subsidy is a bad thing. Everybody wants to do it. Nobody knows how to do it or do it well. And that's the problem. Let's move on to inflationary pressures, but of course, rising interest rates. A lot of central banks are indeed easing up on the tightening of their monetary policies. We're looking at the Fed raising their interest rates yet again, but a lot of economists, consensus-wise, are arguing that this is nearer to the end of the rate hike cycle. Domestically in Malaysia, we saw a rather surprise move by Bank Negara of not raising the interest rate back in January,
2023,
maintaining at 2.75%. At OPR. Some of the economists are rather confident, saying that another 25 bips hike is inevitable. Looks like inevitable didn't come to pass. But there is still the whole conversation of if another interest rate hike is going to be done for the next MPC meeting, May, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong. But generally speaking, there could be another 25 basis points hike in tandem with the US Fed. But of course, inflation is easing up in key markets, especially in the US. But in developed markets like the UK, it's still well into the double digits. China inflationary pressures are being suppressed artificially, one would argue, because of the high subsidies that is currently being implemented there. In this region, we're looking at Malaysia inflation headline at about 3.0, easing up from 3.3 last year. But there are some caveats when we look at, say, for instance, World Bank estimates saying that the 2.5 to 3.0 is possible, but there's a lot of externality factors, including geopolitical pressures coming from Ukraine and Russia, postulations of China in Taiwan, many lah, there are banyak asterisks. That is giving a whole lot of uncertainty when it comes to risk premiums. Having said that, Malaysian political risk, I would argue, has abated quite a bit. We're looking at this Malaysia Madani moving ahead. We're looking at this cobbled together government seems to be working well and seems to be chugging along just fine. The externality threats of destabilizing the government, i.e. Perikatan Nasional, seems to be mitigated. All this seems to be, we're looking at perception. Do you feel that the risk profile of the global economic status is actually rising, but domestically it's currently being mitigated to some degree?
You're right. So the signals, I think a reference a layman person like me would actually look at is actually a reference to the...
Not layman, but yes, go on.
Still layman. I'm no expert, by the way, but just sharing some views. Is the Western market, because they would hit the first, then it will come trickle here. And having said that, I agree with what you mentioned, right? So I remain cautiously optimistic. In the sense of, yes, you're right, the signals, the positive signals are there, whether it's geopolitical, whether it's about control measures with regards to the economy. So it's been good. So it's almost like Erik ten Hag and Manchester United. I have to put in there. I'm a Manchester United fan. I know you're not.
I'm having a problem with my own Chelsea issues, and Lokman, my colleague, is also having this whole Liverpool issue.
Yeah, but
FSG,
so if you're a Manchester United fan, you could resonate with the Malaysian
after
economy.
years of anguish. I get that bit. But do you feel that the situation is going to change for the better or for the? What's the outlook for your?
So I wouldn't deny. I think it's practical move when you say about MPC in May, whereby they're probably a slightly more prudent or conservative actions or mitigations, whether it's a rise of interest just to countermeasure the inflation, just to reduce domestic spending, and also not to increase the price as high. So I feel it's, back to your question, I feel that we're kind of in a good place. I think our government, for the short term that they have been managing it quite okay, and we've seen the signals. And then the Prime Minister was very clear in terms of where he wants Malaysia to head, and it's quite positive at the moment. So that's why I say I'm consciously optimistic. We don't know what's going to happen for the next 3-6 months, but I think where things are going, it looks quite positive.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody says that they know how things the near term is going to pan out, that person is definitely lying. Okay, let's talk about the budget specific. There are some ministries that I am looking attentively at. Just yesterday, the Health Minister, Dr. Zaliha, had a town hall talking about contract workers, talking about the procurement processes, talking about CAPEX and DevEx versus OPEX in terms of the Health Ministry. That's one ministry that I'm looking at. There's also another ministry, which is, of course, the Communications and Digital Ministry. 5G rollout has always been the big thorn in how Malaysia moves ahead with network and connectivity. I'm going to MWC Barcelona next week. I'm going to be speaking to some people when it comes to 5G connectivity there on Malaysia. Please forgive me. I know I can talk about Malaysia in Malaysia, but let's talk about Malaysia in Barcelona because international flavors, okay? There's also that whole notion of the PMO specific, because we're looking at SPA, Suruhanjaya Perkhidmatan Awam, with 1.8 million, and the defined contribution and defined benefit management of how we're looking at 1.8 million current civil service and how that is going to pan out to co-op and, of course, pension funds moving forward. And the MITI specific, because what Titi Wangsa MP raised, Dato' Johari Ghani raised in the parliament, was actually quite interesting. He says that when a foreign direct investment comes in, everything is signed, we announce. The number of direct FDIs. But then, there's no audit of it, there's no translation of it in terms of how much materialized. More importantly, because Dato' Joe is an accountant, so am I, he's like, how much outflow? Then we can reconcile. Otherwise, we're just talking, rubbish, quite frankly. So these are the ministries that I am looking forward to when it comes to this budget and how it is going to pan out. What about you? What would be some of the ministries that you're looking at?
I think barring what you said just now, I think those are key ministries that are looking at, like trades, MITI and stuff like that, right? Digital, it's big, right? I think Prime Minister Anwar also have mentioned about digitalization, supporting MSMEs through digitalization. I would foresee that also would be the case. But also I'm looking into specifics of the social delivery goods and services. And we've mentioned earlier about cash aid. This is not necessarily cash aid, but incentives around the social sector. I feel that's a strong play as well, especially with the Malaysia Madani holistic approach, whole society approach, and also just to give that safety net that we've talked earlier to those who might not have that access, right? So I think ministries who are into either KPKP, KPWKM and stuff like that would have a major, I wouldn't say budget, but major role to play in terms of ensuring resiliencies for the bigger mass of the rakyat.
I think so. You're pretty much consistent with our guest just now, Hafiz of Bauer Group, when he was talking to Harits at Pasar Borong Selayang. He argues then, when we started the show at 9 o'clock just now, he argues that the Agriculture Ministry is going to be a key factor here, not because of the production of food per se, but just in general, food security.
Yes, yeah.
So do you feel that that is one of the key factors here as well?
Yeah. So things that not necessarily directly translate into KPI
Yeah.
or dollars and cents
Yeah.
matrix. I think that will be key, right? You spoke about food security. We probably talk about employability or youth employability, access to employability generally, not just the urban populations, for example, women into entrepreneurship, rural entrepreneurship and stuff like that, right? So these are the factors that might not be directly attributable to the budgets, but we feel that there will be some form, one way or another, that this support will be catered for this group through the ministries or relevant agencies or ministries.
What is the one thing that you want in the budget?
One thing.
Yang you nak betul-betul.
I think for me it's almost like a catalyzing
Mesti ada
scheme.
T5 speak right now, eh? Yes, what is it? Lower income tax?
Yeah, well, I guess that, but also things around that catalyzing things that probably that we don't foresee will happen. So, for example, investment, foreign investment, right? If there's more co-match funding, incentives that government could also, I wouldn't say resuscitate, but also try to accelerate growth in that area. That is something that potentially a lot of businesses might look at. That's one. But secondly, you've mentioned about tax and I wouldn't say cash out or cash aid per se, but things or goodies that actually help in the longevity of Malaysians lah.
Okay.
So that would be interesting. I don't know how, I don't know what, but